Okay, let's call to order the February 24, 2016 Planning and Zoning meeting. First item on our agenda is roll call.
Commissioner Teta?
Here.
Commissioner Kohler? Here. Commissioner Schernick?
Here.
Commissioner Goldberg?
Here.
Commissioner Flagg? Here. Commissioner Bruneau?
Here.
Next is communications from Development Services Manager Joni Marsh.
None this evening, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a public hearing, so next we open this to the public invited to be heard. Is there anybody signed up, Jane? Oh, okay. All right, Jane will check, and we'll go with the sign-up list first, but it looks as though we have a gentleman in the audience who'd like to speak.
Yeah, I'm on the list.
Oh, you're on the list. Great. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? If so, you'll line up after this gentleman. So, sir, when you come down, please limit your comments to 5 minutes. And this needs to be comments that are not about something on tonight's agenda. Okay? We have... Okay. And it looks like your name is Leo Buhaker? Buhaker? Okay. So if you could state for the record your name and address once you start, and we have some lights on there. Once the red light lights up, I'll have to cut you off at the end of your 5 minutes.
It's an honor to, my name is Leo Buhaker. I'm at 833 Baker Street, Longmont, Colorado, 80501. It's an honor to be here in front of the orthopedic surgeons. My surgeon is Dr. Sean Johnson at the Denver Vale Orthopedic Surgeons. He did my knee surgery very successfully. In a county so preoccupied with medical marijuana rights, drug rights, domestic partnership rights, animal rights, reproductive rights, tree rights, and oil rights, I now have across the street a pawn and gun shop openly displaying guns and ammo signs 100 yards away from an elementary school and 20 yards away from Circle Graphics factory with hundreds of employees. Not only is this shocking, the fact that there's a man openly displaying the sale of guns and ammunition close to an elementary school, close to residences, close to a huge factory with hundreds of employees. He's got junk in his front yard, and now he has lights being displayed in violation of the dark sky statutes, which the standard is 2 candle lights. The lights which keep me up at night are displaying probably 100 candle lights. So I took a picture of the pawn shop. Attached to the picture is a picture of the gun shop where the people, the Muslims who bought the guns at the San Bernardino massacre, the signs, the building where those guns were bought from at the San Bernardino massacre look just like Grandpa's gun shop. So here we are in progressive, sensitive Boulder County, and now we got this guy selling ammo and firearms across the street from where people live. It's shocking. I can't believe it. Would you mind showing this? Here's one for this side, too. They even took away the speed limit signs in the same street to make it even more dangerous for kids and people walking across the street. So I'm here. I made complaints to code enforcement, the guy in the red. I know him. I wrote certified letters. Hey, why are the dark sky statutes not being enforced for this guy? What is he? Politician? Is he a famous guy? I don't know. All I know is that I see a lot of guys coming out there with weapons. It scares me. It scares the community. It's a violation of community standards at the very least. So I'm here today to ask the Planning and Zoning Commission very simply to open up an investigation. Why did he have a business permit? Why does he have garbage in front of his building? Why does he have firearms, 38 Specials automatics display pictures of them outside his building? Why are his lights not pointed downward? I'm a small businessman. Okay, I'm a business consultant. I spent $1,500 on some lights in my yard. I got a letter saying, hey, they're pointed upward. You got to point them downward. I spent another $1,500 to get the lights pointed downward. I want the same to apply to this guy here, okay? I'm not a gun salesman, all right? Aside from that, I'm asking you that you enforce the laws of this town against this guy who is openly violating the community standards as well as the code enforcement. Does anyone have any questions of me?
I don't think we usually engage in a back and forth Q&A session during public invited to be heard.
Okay.
It's not our standard.
Yeah.
But I appreciate your offer in that
Right.
regard.
It's a healthy offer, believe me.
Okay.
So again, so in terms of asking for an investigation or some sort of action, so I can understand what's happening here with the violations of the code enforcement with this pawn shop, how is that going to be addressed?
I'll let Joni Marsh take that.
Commissioner Shernick and members of the commission, Mr. Buhacker has submitted several code complaints to our code enforcement officers who have worked through several of those complaints. He's also submitted several letters to our city attorney's office, so we are familiar with the issues and will continue to take it through the appropriate channel, which is through code enforcement.
Okay. Well, that's an unacceptable answer. The only reason is that I sent these letters close to 2 months ago. I have not received one response. Okay, no response, no action, no changes. This is unacceptable. This is a dereliction of duty, and I would ask Ms. Marsh to provide an answer to me within 30 days before I begin to take other action to the city of Longmont.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Buhacker.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
Commissioner
comments.
Shernick. And again, I made that request of the city to provide an answer to me within 30 days.
Okay, we have your comments in our record, and we'll move on with, is there anybody else in the public who would like to be heard tonight? Seeing no one, we will close the public invited to be heard section, and we'll move on with item 5 on our agenda, which is Front Range Orthopedic Center Conditional Use Site Plan with planner Ben Ortiz.
Commissioner Shernick, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Ben Ortiz, Planning and Development Services. The project tonight is a conditional use site plan. It's for a 32,525 square foot orthopedic center on a 3.2 acre lot. It's on lot 7D of the Longmont Business Center. Hang on just a quick second so I can pull up the laser pointer. And it's in this upper northeast corner of the lot. The project is located south of Dry Creek Drive. It's east of South Fordham, and it's north of Highway 119. The project represents one of 4 proposed future uses on what will be known as the Front Range Health and Wellness Center. 3 of the 4 projects are currently going through the planning process right now. They include a skilled nursing facility, which will be on Lot 7B, a medical office building on Lot 7C, which is adjacent to the use that we're looking at tonight, and then the Front Range Orthopedic Center, which is on Lot 7D here. Lot 7A will include an athletics facility with an aquatic center, but an application hasn't been submitted yet. So a neighborhood meeting was held on March 31st of last year, and no one from the public attended that meeting. Property owners within 1,000 feet of the property were notified of the development application, and staff received no feedback from the public as a result of the notice of application or the notice of public hearing for tonight's public hearing. We contacted 4 referral agencies, CenturyLink, Excel, Clover Creek HOA, and the post office, and staff received no feedback from any of the referral agencies contacted. However, because 20-foot of CDOT right-of-way will be used to meet the 50-foot scenic entry overlay landscape buffer requirement, a CDOT special use permit is required, and so they've been in communication with CDOT, and that application has been granted. So back in October, some of you may recall that the Planning and Zoning Commission heard and approved a preliminary plat for this project, as well as a variance for a 20-foot variance to the required 50-foot scenic entry overlay buffer. And the Planning and Zoning Commission approved both the preliminary plat and the variance. So we reviewed the project for conformance with items listed in the spreadsheet, and we found that the project to be in conformance with the city's code requirements. Signage was not submitted with this application. However, being subject to scenic entry overlay standards, a master sign plan will have to be submitted if they intend on putting up signage anywhere in the development. And that's just a scenic entry overlay requirement. But they may submit a master sign plan independently of any of the projects that are going to be submitted. The project will have two points of entry, and the first will be off of some newly dedicated right-of-way on the eastern side of the property. The new road will be called Business Center Way, and that's this area here, and then this is the entrance point. The second point of entry comes by way of a private drive that will connect Dry Creek Drive and South Fordham Street to the west, and so this is the private drive, and this will provide access to all four developments. There is a bike path that will be built in the landscape buffer on the south side of the development. Just follow that pointer. It's along here. And from this, we have bicycle and pedestrian connections that are made into the orthopedic center. So we have one here, and we have one here. And the path network will also provide a direct connection to the RTD bus stop adjacent to the property, which is down in this area here. And so as you can see, there is a network of pedestrian connections through the development, and the dashed dotted lines show the alignment of the internal non-motorized network. So it's fairly comprehensive, and it will provide a lot of connectivity within the development and between developments. So this slide shows the north and east elevations. The area to the right on the north elevation, which is on the top of your screen, is the canopy over the main entrance to the facility. And the area to the left on the east elevation on the bottom of your screen is the canopy over which the discharges will occur. And this slide shows the south and west elevations. South elevation at the top of the screen shows the discharge area, and the west elevation on the bottom of the screen shows the main entrance for new admits. Staff reviewed the architecture for compliance to the non-residential design standards as well as scenic entry overlay standards, and staff is satisfied that the building complies with applicable architectural standards. So staff feels that this project conforms to the review criteria. However, there still are some remaining revisions to be made to the plans. So for this reason, staff recommends approving the Front Range Orthopedic Center conditional use site plan with conditions as reflected in PZR 2016-5B, with the condition that the applicant make any remaining staff requested changes to the plan. And with that, that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try and take those now.
Commissioner Flagg.
Mr. Ortiz, every one of the developments on this site is going to be taken separately, I assume. So first we'll be doing the orthopedic center, and then other buildings will come in equally so that we can look at their pedestrian connections as part of the whole?
Chairman Shernick, Commissioner Flagg, that's correct. Currently we have 3 applications within the department that are being reviewed. I'm reviewing 2 of those. One is the one we're looking at tonight, and the other one is a medical office building, which is immediately adjacent. The third is for a skilled nursing facility, and these are all being reviewed independently, but at the same time we're looking at them as a whole for like interconnectivity of pedestrian and bicycle access, that sort of thing.
Any other questions for Ben at this time about his presentation? Seeing none, Ben, is the applicant going to present? I mean, they don't have to. Okay. So again, please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Dave Demchuk. I'm the CEO for Front Range Orthopedics. I live in Louisville, Colorado, 497 Muirfield Circle. Front Range Orthopedic Center has been in the community for just a short period of time, like 46 years. We last year took care of over 40,000 patients in the clinic, 12,000 patients in our PT area. And we did over 2,000 surgeries in our surgery center. Over the 15 years that we've been in this building that we're at now, we've added some of the more services. Unfortunately, we had to add them in different parts of the building, making it very inconvenient for our patients because they have to go upstairs for admission and go around the building to the northwest side to go to PT or go to the northeast side to go to MRI. Our lease is up in March of 2017, which gives us cause to look for a new building. And so therefore, we're looking at this site. We're very excited about this site, but we're very anxious because we've got a short window of time to get this facility up and going. We've been serving this community, like I said, for a long time. We feel like we've been instrumental in serving the needs of the community with orthopedics. We've got 10 physicians, surgeons that serve this community, 7 PAs, which is 17 providers, ranging all the way from foot and ankle, neck, back, hip, knees, hand, upper extremity. So we really cover the gamut. And so we're anxious to get moving, and we feel like we are a very important cog to this community. Any questions?
Any questions for the applicant at this time? We may have more,
All right.
but thank you very much.
I'm happy to answer.
Okay.
I'm very passionate about this.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing, so if there's anybody in the public who would like to speak on this, nobody's signed up. Nobody's raising their hand coming forward, so we will close the public hearing section and we'll go to discussion amongst the commission. Comments, questions? Commissioner Bruno?
Yeah, so I guess this had to go through sort of a scenic entryway. There was some requirements there that it had to go through, correct? And then, you know, the only thing that I'm seeing that kind of sort of concerns me is just the fact that, you know, that is pretty much the first thing people are going to see as they enter into Longmont via one of the main, you know, highways that come into town. It's right across the street from the big beer can at Oscar Blues and everything, but I was just looking at this east elevation and just finding it, you know, kind of, I guess, kind of uninteresting to me. And I don't know if anybody else feels like there's any issue with that being sort of the first thing people see as they enter into town or not, but that was really the only thing that kind of caught my attention.
Any other thoughts? Comments? I'll make a response to Commissioner Bruno. One thing that is also in the plan is a lot of extra landscaping with a lot of extra trees, which I believe we also reviewed in the original application in the previous step where we were looking at the setback from the scenic overlay. And now it'll take time for that to mature, but it will help with your concerns, you know, with just direct view onto that east facade. You know, the architecture, subjective. I personally like it quite a bit. I'm really, really happy to see a gabion wall being used at their entrance because that's a really cool architectural element. I noticed that the architects who are on the sheets are well-respected architects from Boulder, so you know, that helps me feel okay about their design. But again, that's very subjective. So. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for your response. I mean, it was just something, and again, I don't think that what I'm looking at here goes into a whole lot of detail, and maybe you all have kind of been through this before with the landscape and all that sort of thing. So it was just something that struck me. I don't really see detail of materials or anything, so maybe it's a little bit more exciting when it's not in black and white.
Commissioner Flake.
One of the parts, if you go into your agenda, and if you go to the selection, you'll have to get out of this.
Okay.
There is a part, and I can point it to you, it shows you the selection, the third one down. one more. That one.
This one here?
That's the one.
Oh, this one does go into more of that?
Yeah, especially if you put the screen down to 50%, I think that helped. Subsequent pages.
Commissioner Teta.
I think with regard to Commissioner Bruno's comments, certainly compared to the west or the south elevations, it's boring, but I'm not sure who sees the east elevation. From the scenic entryway point of view, we want the west and the south to look really good, and the east not so much, or not as important, certainly.
Any other comments, Commissioner Goldberg?
Yeah, excuse me. Glad to be back. I think I just want to thank the applicant for coming and bringing this project before us, and thank Commissioner Ortiz for his work on this. But Commissioner Planner Ortiz, sorry, I'm out of practice. But listen, I think this went through the review process by our planning department not once, but I think 2 times already. And when Ben tells me that they've met the burden, met the kind of architectural requirement, the burden that our code sets forth, and then not just from that perspective, but it also meets, it's in conforming to the code across the board. I would have trouble faulting or denying this project based on my own subjective attitude on the architecture. I thought it was attractive enough and not a bother to the neighbors and within our code. So I'll be supporting this project.
Others? I'm also in support of it. Again, I think the applicant's point that they've been a solid community member 46 years. We've got 17 highly professional practitioners involved with this business. It's a really good project for us to promote within the city, even with its proximity to the scenic overlay. I personally will make a motion to for PZR 2016-5B, which is conditional, so that the applicants would be required to resolve any staff issues that may still arise. We already did the public. Yeah, thanks. So just need to know if there's a second for the motion.
I'll second that, Commissioner. Commissioner
Goldberg seconds. Any further discussion, questions? Let's take a vote. My screen says that is unanimous 6-0. So that passes. And let me read the notice here. This item now enters a 7-day appeal period. During this time, any aggrieved party may appeal the Commission's decision by submitting a written appeal letter stating why the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision should be amended or reversed by City Council. All appeals must be in writing and must be received in the City Clerk's office and the Planning Office within the 7-day appeal period. The appeal period begins Thursday, February 25 at 8 a.m. and ends Wednesday, March 2 at 5 p.m. Thank you very much to Ben Ortiz and also to the applicants. And Ben had something else to say.
Just wanted to say thank you.
Okay.
And I hope you get out of here sooner than you did last week.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks again to the applicants. Really appreciate all of your work on this. So next on our agenda is Envision Longmont with a presentation by Senior Planner Aaron Fosdick and Transportation Planner Phil Greenwald. Yeah, we had 10 minutes to spare.
That cutoff is 11 o'clock?
Yeah, 11 o'clock, yeah. That wasn't too bad. It's better than 1:30.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission, Commissioner Shernick. Thank you for the introduction. Phil and I are not quite sure how to get this onto full screen mode, so hopefully you're okay with the little heading bar. Sorry about that. So Ben said that he hopes you guys are out of here sooner than last week. Phil and I have about 2.5 hours programmed for our discussion, so we'll try to stick to that. No. Really what we wanted to do tonight is just continue the discussion that we began last month regarding the policy framework. So this is really a continuation of that more general discussion. Hopefully you've had a chance to look through your packet, and hopefully it's okay. We're planning on this being relatively informal. Phil and I don't plan to do a lot of talking. We mostly want to hear from you. We thought we would start out by just kind of reminding everyone where we are at in the Envision Longmont planning process. We have been working on this for a year now. We are entering kind of the final stages of the project, and we are starting to draft the plan. So we will be able to share a draft plan with you. We're anticipating probably a study session type of meeting in April to review the plan. Folks that are on the coordinating committee, Commissioner Flagg and Commissioner Schernick, you will see the plan in the next several weeks, and we look forward to comments on that. And then ultimately, Planning Commission will provide a recommendation on this in May.
Aaron, your little arrow covers your timeline for this phase that we're in now. What was the timeline underneath that underway teal arrow?
Really kind of the first quarter of this year.
Nice job, dude.
Yeah. And so just to kind of reorient everyone and remind you that thus far you've provided input on the overall vision, which is comprised of 6 guiding principles, and you see those here. Those are really all working together, and the plan is really aimed at making Longmont a more sustainable and a more resilient community. And so this graphic is just to illustrate that all of these things really work together, and you should be relatively familiar with these guiding principles and the goals. We've spent a lot of time kind of talking about those. The next level that we really are getting into, and kind of where we started our discussion last time, was around the specific policies that are kind of found under each of the goals. And so what we thought we would do tonight is just kind of go through these. I'm not planning on necessarily reading all of this. This is all from your packet. But Phil and I thought this would be a good way for us to kind of stay on task, make sure we get through everything, and make sure we hear from you, any feedback that you have, and we can just kind of go guiding principle by guiding principle. I realize that these slides violate PowerPoint rules in that they have, more than 10 words or whatever. But rest assured, this is the exact same information that's in your packet. This is, again, just kind of a reminder. So before we dive in, are there any general questions, any additional items you need from Phil and I before we kind of start the discussion around the policy framework? So just to orient you to what was in your packet, and again, this is kind of a repeat of information. We did provide you the policy summary sheets. Those provide higher level summaries of the actual policy framework, which you've also received. We may need to go to this policy framework. I know some of you have provided comments on that. I have a copy here. If you have specific questions around, well, what is the language around one of these policies, we can reference this and take a look in more detail. But really at this point, what we're aiming to do is build on the input and the work that we've done to date with the goals and the guiding principles, make sure that you're okay with the policy framework moving forward so that next time you see the plan, you can really focus on the implementation strategies as well as the metrics and kind of the overall layout of the plan. So that's kind of what our intent is to make sure that you don't have any further questions or anything else that you think we need to be considering under the policy framework. So with that, we'll start with livable centers, corridors, and neighborhoods. You see here that this is probably the broadest guiding principle. It covers a number of things, certainly a number of things that the Planning Commission works on. Goals that are covered in this guiding principle range from growth patterns and land use, infill and redevelopment, downtown, infrastructure, sense of community, parks, greenways, and open space, as well as established neighborhoods. And so you can see within each of those goals, there's a number of policies that are speaking to things like growth management, housing, quality of life, community character, infrastructure. So I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions on this guiding principle and the policies contained under it. Okay. The next one, and one thing I'll note is we have reordered these, so if you got really used to seeing them a certain way, they're in a slightly different order. And certainly if you have questions or comments, I'll bring Phil over to the mic here. But the next guiding principle is related to a complete, balanced, and connected transportation system. We have 3 goals that have a number of policies, obviously related to connectivity, transit supportive development, TOD, special transportation needs, connections regionally and locally, and then obviously dealing with each of the modes of travel that we're looking at, as well as kind of how we implement these things and being stewards of our resources and providing a supportive transportation system for economic development.
With regard to balance, Phil, do you mean modes of travel primarily?
Well, I think with balanced, we're really talking about more of the system and how everything kind of integrates. So it is about balancing modes in one sense, but it's also about that bigger system-wide idea too. So it is, I mean, I hate to say when we talk about it as far as moving people out of automobiles, that's typically what people are talking about. We're really talking about trying to make the best use of the system that we have. And so does that incorporate more buses? Does that incorporate more bicycling? We think that that's part of this balance that needs to happen.
I think my initial take was that it was perhaps balanced as to regionally, like parts of the city that would get more or less focus, maybe.
Well, I think the balance will also come as far as when, I think you've seen all the maps where we talk about areas of change and kind of those places where we really see more density. So some of that balance will have to go to where the growth occurs as well. So that'll be part of the issue too. So where we already have really solid like transit corridors is where we think that most of the growth will be centered as far as what we've seen as far with the map where it's areas of change.
And yet I suspect that, with regard especially to bicycle, pedestrian type of access, it's the older, more established parts of the city that might be most lacking or challenged, don't you think?
Well, I think when we talk about those different kinds of the walking and bicycling, we're trying to really talk about, those shorter trips, so all around town. So just trying to get to shopping opportunities or to school, to offices, to work. So doing those, if you have a shorter trip, and when you look at Longmont being very kind of condensed already, pretty much, you really think of a lot of those trips can be made on those shorter scale. I mean, some days are blizzards and rain and things like that, but you still have that idea that many of those trips are very walkable already, especially downtown. In the older section of the town, I mean, that was built with the walking trip in mind. That was the original 1871, history of the city. So very walkable already. I think the bicycle, though, could be enhanced as far as the downtown. We've done a lot of good things with our streets as far as adding more facilities with newer streets. So I think that's what gets to your point.
Thanks.
Phil, quick question, follow up on that. So how will North Main Street let me back up. How do you see that playing out in terms of North Main Street? Because that, to me, that strikes me as one of the least walkable, least bicycle-friendly parts of town.
Chair Schernick, that's a great question, and it really leads into kind of our next step in the Envision Longmont process. We've actually received a grant to start looking at the focus areas, and the first focus area we're going to look at, the one we submitted the grant for and we're awarded funding, was the North Main Street corridor. So if you recall, we had 5 focus areas, and that was one of them. And so the idea is to start looking at that more intensively, and with the idea that we've had these areas of change, and that was a big corridor that kind of came up in the area of change. And it's a place where we really see a lot of this future growth happening. Again, it's a great, solid transit corridor with buses. It is missing that bicycle component, and the walkability, while it's there, is probably not the greatest as far as crossing that as a barrier. So this study will look at all those different issues. We've really talked about how do you cross Main Street. Some of our, unfortunately, some of our traffic fatalities or pedestrian fatalities have happened in that section of Main Street. So we really want to focus on making that a safer place for pedestrians and actually being a place that can take some of that growth that we're looking for in the future, because we can't grow out.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So as we move down, the next guiding principle relates to housing, services, amenities, and opportunities for all. This is another one that's relatively broad in terms of what it covers. Obviously, we've heard a lot through this process about accessible and affordable housing, kind of general well-being, access to services and education, access to parks, recreation, and open space, cultural diversity and inclusion, community participation. And so we have a number of policies within this section of the plan that are speaking to how we accomplish these types of things.
So Aaron, question for you on this. There's a setting targets bullet on the first page of the summary sheet, the nice colorful thing. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it says striving for 10% of homes built annually to be permanently affordable. But what I saw in the paper was that that's not really been determined yet by council, that they're still discussing that, still debating whether that's really the language we would use. So this would change, perhaps?
We've been doing, Chairman Chernick, members of the commission, we've been doing a lot of work with council on housing, and Kathy Fedler and her team has really been leading that up as part of this Envision Longmont process. And we have talked a lot about what should the goal be. You know, that's, I think, something that's really important for us to keep in mind as we try to identify ways in which we can incentivize housing. We need to kind of know what that goal is. And so early on at one of the meetings, we talked about, should it be a number? Should it be an overall percentage of new units? Should it be a percentage of our overall housing stock? Council most recently talked about this at their retreat, and I think there is still some question about what that number should be. I think it's fair to say that there's general agreement we should have a goal around it. What that is, I don't know if there's agreement on that. So I think we have a little bit more work to do. Ultimately, I think it's our plan to have a target in Envision Longmont that we can really be working towards and really be able to measure ourselves against and say, are we going in the right direction, or do we maybe need a course correction? So early on, I think we had the message that 10% might be the right number. Since that time, I think we've backtracked a little bit and think we may need to have a little bit more conversation around what that target is. But so I think it could change. It could end up being that, but it could change.
Okay. So process-wise, what happens with a plan like this if you put a specific number in and then you actually reach it sooner than expected? I mean, I'm not saying we will in this case, but if you did, I mean, then you just say, great, check it off, we've met our goal, but then what? I mean, do you go back and revise the plan and say, let's up the number again, or I mean, what options do we have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a conversation that our policymakers as well as staff and the community would need to have and say, you know, great, did we meet the goal and now we're in a perfect state? Do we need to do any more work? I'm guessing the answer to that would always be no. You can probably always do more. Conditions are always changing. The community's continuing to change and mature, so we would potentially look at updating the plan. You know, that may coincide with a plan update, and we could revisit whatever type of goal that is. You know, I think hopefully we're setting aggressive enough goals that, you know, we're not able to meet them next year, because then maybe we haven't shot high enough. But certainly I think that there's always the potential to revisit those and, you know, reassess what the conditions are, where we're at, and certainly move those out if we need to.
Okay, great, thanks.
Do you have a time frame where you start to look at, you know, when you would consider an update to a plan? I mean, is it every 10 years?
Historically, so the last time we updated this plan was in 2003. I think it's generally our plan to not wait more than 10 years, and I don't know if Joni would differ, but I think that's what we've talked about. You know, this plan we always say is going to kind of cover us for the next 10 to 20 years, but reasonably we would assume we would update it within that 10-year period. Certainly if, you know, things aren't changing a lot, if conditions are, you know, relatively the same, maybe we can wait a little longer. On the inverse side, you know, if things have changed drastically and our plan becomes out of date, then maybe we need to update it sooner. Any other specific questions or feedback on this guiding principle? The next one that we look at is safe, healthy, and adaptable community. Again, I think the kind of common message here is that these are broad topics. They are integrated and they do relate to one another, but this one has goals related to healthy and active lifestyles, access to affordable, healthy food, partnerships with public safety, access to health and human services, and minimizing risks due to disasters and hazards. So you can see the wide variety of policies that are contained within this guiding principle to support those goals, range from education and outreach to food access, really thinking about public safety and response times, and also taking a look at man-made and natural hazards, how our community can kind of prepare for those, mitigate those, and be a little bit more resilient in the face of those types of things. So that's really what this section is centered on in terms of that policy framework. Moving down to the next one, responsible stewards of resources. This one's pretty straightforward, but does cover a number of topics, ranging from, we have goals around protecting and conserving our resources in the environment, looking at water supply, historic and cultural resources, as well as agricultural resources. Again, looking at the parks and open space and greenway system, but really kind of the ecological functions of those things. And then finally, looking at essential programs and services. So again, thinking about city government and the resources that go along with that. So you can imagine the types of policies that we have, talk about natural areas, wildlife, pollution, conservation, energy in general, historic preservation, and then, of course, some of the things around service delivery, budgeting, government transparency. So quite a wide variety of topics covered here.
So, Aaron, stewardship is it defined in the document? I thought I saw a definition of it, but I can't put my finger on it right now.
I don't think we defined it in the policy summaries. We will have a glossary in the overall document. I haven't seen that yet. It's not finished yet. So we can certainly add that if we want to define specifically how this plan talks about stewardship.
Well, I think,
and we can also put it in the narrative, which I think it may be in the policy framework, kind of what we mean when we say stewardship.
I think it would be wise to define it because there may be a slightly different take on it from a planning point of view than there is from just its common usage.
Okay. Anything else on this one? The last guiding principle that we'll look at and the policies around that relate to job growth and economic vitality, really focusing on innovation and collaboration. So this really pulls a lot of these goals come from the Advanced Longmont Plan, talking about job opportunities and economic diversity, opportunities for collaboration, innovation, and entrepreneurship, building space and infrastructure needs, workforce readiness, general quality of life, and then the airport really as it relates to economic development. So you'll see the airport in a couple sections here of the plan. Policies here relate to business recruitment and retention, workspace, that may have to do with kind of the physical spaces as well as infrastructure. We've got some policies around land use, particularly as we've kind of split that industrial economic development land use category into primary employment areas and mixed use employment areas. Thinking about circulation and access from a transportation system standpoint, infrastructure needs of our businesses, and then kind of land use compatibility as well as different types of airport operations. So again, a wide variety of policies in this section. So I think Phil and I will take your lack of questions as support for this policy framework. Now would really be the time if you have any issues to let us know. I mean, obviously you'll be making a recommendation on the whole plan, and we will certainly welcome comments on any sections of the plan, but really what we're trying to do is make it relatively easy for you when we do bring you a large plan document to say, okay, we've seen the goals, we've seen the vision, we've seen the guiding principles. Now we've seen the policy framework, and we all feel pretty good about that. And obviously, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm hoping that that's what this meeting is kind of signifying to me. So kind of our next steps are to continue to gather input on this policy framework really through the end of this month, which is right around the corner. We'll have a staff draft of the plan and coordinating committee draft in the next week or so. We will have a public release draft at the end of March, and so certainly we'll share that with the commission. We'll have an open house to review that with the community on March 30th in the evening. That's a Wednesday evening. We'll be hosting that at the library. We'll make sure we give you notice. This we are intending to come to Planning Commission for a recommendation, and we will be seeking a unanimous recommendation of support. Hopefully we have a 7-0 vote on that. And that will be again at your first meeting in May, hopefully. And then this will go to City Council in June. This is adopted by ordinance, so there'll be 2 readings and a public hearing at City Council. We're doing similar work with them to make sure that everyone's kind of coming along at the same stages. So it may make sense for us to bring back the full plan in April after you've had a little bit of time with it. We can potentially send it out, maybe even outside of your regular packet, just to give you enough time to look through it. And then if you have specific suggestions on how you'd like to go through that with us, we can kind of cover any questions and comments during April, and then make sure we're in really good shape for May and have had a chance to incorporate all your feedback. So with that, I'll ask if you have any further questions or comments.
Commissioner Flake.
I don't know quite how to bring this one up, but in the plan, there's some discussion about mixed-use development. And it seems to me that here at Planning Commission, we've had some nights where presentations have been made to change the zoning or to change the land use such that we're not doing true mixed-use development. For a variety of reasons. So then, so as we're going forth and we're wanting to, again, make as part of the policy of the comprehensive plan to encourage or to put forth mixed-use development, in my mind, it's a little bit like, how do we do that? How strong do we make that policy? If it's truly a policy that is really wanted, how do you structure it in such a way to implement that policy long term so that we're not faced with, I think, just about every session having to change it, augment, differentiate, because for one reason or another it is not possible, practical, appropriate? I don't have an answer. I'm just asking.
Well, actually, let Aaron reply.
I don't know that I have a perfect answer either. I mean, I think what we've heard from the community and staff as well as elected and appointed officials such as yourself is that people want to see mixed use. That doesn't mean necessarily, and I think we've tried to acknowledge this in the plan, that it doesn't always have to be vertical mixed use. We realize that's not practical. That's not what the community wants. We've also heard that it's important for us to be flexible, both with our comprehensive plan and then ultimately with our land development code. And so I think, as you know, really zoning is really what's going to kind of guide what develops. And so I think as we work on updating our land development code, after this is adopted, we can take a look and see, what types of different things we can put in the zoning code. I think we've tried to strike a balance and encourage mixed use where appropriate here. I think we really see that as, helping to support a more enhanced connected transportation system, providing folks opportunity to work and live in the community, providing access to services. And so I think as we look at that whole suite of things that are really making up those guiding principles and ultimately our vision, mixed use is a component of that. Certainly, I don't think we think that we're going to have mixed use all over the city, but I think we have identified some strategic locations in the mixed use corridor, in some of the regional and neighborhood centers where we think that's appropriate. And hopefully the framework that we've set up with this plan will encourage folks to do that. and hopefully we can follow that up with some implementation tools around zoning, development code updates, and things of that sort that will really make that happen and make your jobs hopefully a little bit easier. If you have specific comments, particularly as we look at the implementation section, which you haven't seen yet, that might be a really good place for us to focus some of that conversation.
Commissioner Teta.
I happen to be a big fan of mixed use, and I think that's primarily because I've seen it work in denser places, be it Boulder or Denver. I think the lack of viability, which we've encountered with developers primarily, or even in actual practice, Prospect comes to mind, has mostly to do with there just not being enough residential density to support it. And I don't have any problem getting out in front of predicted residential density, but I think that's what's going to drive it if and when it takes hold. There's just have to be enough people concentrated in a small enough area that they can somehow support the commercial that primarily seems to be there to provide for them, or it needs to be very accessible and obvious to everyone else, or it's just not going to be viable. And if it's not viable to a developer, it's not going to happen.
It's a very interesting point in that so far some of the mixed-use projects we're seeing are in the redevelopment areas, like First and Main, and we've still got a lot of greenfield development. So to Commissioner Teta's point, we may not see much mixed use until we get further down the road and start redeveloping more, such as like the Eisenhower apartments. But I have a process question for Aaron. Well, actually, two questions. So just to be clear, because we didn't touch on it, that sustainability and resilience are overarching themes that overarch all of the framework policies we just talked about, correct?
That is correct, and we hope to add a little bit of language within each of the guiding principles, specifically talking about how the guiding principles and the goals contained within those sections really address that. But yes, they are woven throughout the entire document.
Okay, and so assuming the new plan gets approved and passed by council, and we've got all our green lights and this is a go, say like by July, August, September, somewhere in there, when would we expect to see new review criteria come in front of us? And would projects that are currently in the pipeline, would they be grandfathered on the old comprehensive plan review criteria?
Members of the Planning Commission, we are beginning the process of looking at updating the development code on the heels of adopting Envision Longmont. I'm guessing that would be at least a 12-month process.
Well, I didn't mean the review criteria on the development code. I meant the review criteria that come from the comprehensive plan.
So remember, the comprehensive plan is not regulatory,
right.
So the review criteria for that are actually in the development code.
Oh, okay.
And so any updates kind of from a regulatory standpoint of how you would evaluate projects will really be part of that land development code update.
Okay, all right.
And so I'll let Joni speak. We haven't specifically talked about, what would be grandfathered or not. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I mean, for those of us who aren't in this every day, it's helpful to get these reminders. It's hard to remember how it all ties together. So.
Right, and so there will be some time where, for example, we're changing some land uses within the planning area. We need to go through a process to reconcile underlying zoning for properties that are already zoned if there's a difference in their land use. So we need to still get our heads around, from an implementation standpoint, how does that occur? When does that occur? What types of changes are going to be made to the development code as a result of Envision Longmont? And so we're beginning that process now with looking at updates to the development code, but certainly we can't really begin to implement Envision Longmont until it's adopted by council.
Right.
So later this year would be a kind of a safe answer.
Okay. All right. Great. Commissioner Flake?
Which is what leads. Mine, which is why I asked my mixed-use questions, because this is going to be the overarching document on which we hang everything else. And so I'm saying it now as an idea that great as policy, how do you implement?
Right. Commissioner Teta?
And to Commissioner
Oops.
Oh, sorry.
Flagg's comments, and the only other comment that I have with regard to affordable housing, I think I just feel like it's such a policy decision that council wouldn't abdicate to us anyway. I just feel like I think we'd be out of line trying to put our imprimatur on, you know, a specific number like 10%, or whether that's of available housing stock or of new builds going forward.
Commissioner Bruno?
Yeah, I just sort of want to second Commissioner Flagg's thoughts a little bit. I feel like as a, you know, sort of as a guideline, as sort of a philosophy, I actually think this all looks great. I mean, I think, as I've mentioned before, I think that you know, when I see this and I see practical applications that, you know, we may be applying this to, I feel like there's a lot of areas where, you know, these things can contradict, obviously, you know, the preservation of the neighborhood while you get the infill and those sorts of things. So I feel like most of the questions that I have are more implementation, and I assume that there will be another forum to sort of discuss those in more depth. Yeah.
So we could really plan on using the April meeting to really focus on implementation and metrics, since that'll be the piece that you haven't seen before. That'll be the new pieces, so we could spend some time going through that with you all.
Commissioner Flake?
I just have one other question I meant to ask earlier. In the document, in the policy, you state something about established neighborhoods. What determines that a neighborhood has become established? Because there are some newer neighborhoods that think of themselves as established. I'm not sure. I'm just asking.
So within the growth framework of the plan, you might remember, or you might not, because it's been several months since we talked about this, but in addition to the future land use map, we have a map that shows areas of change and areas of stability. And so many of those areas, you might remember it being a yellow and red map. Those areas that are yellow are really what are kind of defined as those established neighborhoods. So those areas of stability.
Commissioner Goldberg?
Aaron, this is so administrative, but there's a reference on one of the pages regarding the Longmont Area Economic Council, which is now LEDP. I'm sure you got that covered. And then I just want to suggest that several of us were quiet as you went through the slides this evening, and I just think that's demonstrative of the work that you guys have put into it, and you guys took what seemed like a ridiculous project a few months back and have really made it digestible and even attractive to read, so thank you.
And we have made the change for Longmont Economic Development Partnership. It's just that these drafts preceded that change, but yes, thank you.
Anything further? Aaron, Phil, any commissioners?
One other quick item that we've talked about with council that I think would be really interesting to the commission and to get your input on is, and this kind of gets to your point, Commissioner Flagg, regarding kind of how we implement this plan. You know, right now, folks can come in and request land use amendments at any time throughout the year. One of the things we've talked about from an implementation standpoint is potentially looking at updating the plan, you know, either annually or biannually or on a more I guess regular basis, not regular anytime, but predictable, you know, once or twice a year, quarterly, whatever that ends up being, which I think would help staff, potentially the commission and the community also, to understand the changes in concert with each other, understand what the implications would be for something like mixed use. And so I'll just throw that out. I don't know if that's something we've specifically talked about with this group, but I know we've talked about it with council, and I think there was some general support for something like that. So that may help us as we look at, how do we really achieve some of the goals that are in here? How do we stay the course? Maybe something like that would help us from a land use perspective of being able to really evaluate things with one another at more spaced out intervals and things like that.
So if I hear you right, Erin, you're saying that basically we would kind of capture all of the land use changes and wait until we have a bucket of them and then look at the bucket as a whole, so that we're just making a holistic decision. Is that what you're implying?
Yeah, exactly how that works we haven't determined, but yes, we could say, in January and July of each year we'll accept amendments to the comp plan and we'll look at those. Maybe there'll only be one, maybe there'd be none, but maybe there'd be 10.
Right. I know personally, given that, I would be in favor of that because I've felt like sometimes we've had things come in front of us, just little, half an acre here, an acre there, and there's too much time in between those for us to really understand how it all ties together. So I think that's a great idea. Any other comments? Phil, did you have anything further? No? Okay. Erin, thank you very much, both of you, for all your hard work on this. I know it's a long, long haul, but we're almost there. Okay, this is a public hearing. We'll do the final call for the public invited to be heard. There's one person in the public. I've seen him before, but he's saying no. We'll get him down here to speak sometime soon. Anybody signed up, Jane? I don't think so. No? Okay. We'll close the public invited to be heard. Any items from the commission? Seeing none. Council Representative Finley is not present tonight. We'll skip that item. Any items from Development Services Manager Jenny Marsh? No? Okay. So if nobody's opposed, we will adjourn.